it all sort of sounds so smooth, doesn't it? And that isn't what life is like at all. And my life hasn't been smooth either. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my life, and most importantly, a little bit about why I'm running for president and why I think we're at such a pivotal point in our nation's history. And then I would be happy to take as many questions as we have time for. But before I get into all of that, I want to introduce my husband, Frank. This is Frank in the first row. Frank and I met 34 years ago. We will be married 30 years in less than 2 weeks. May 17th is our 30th year anniversary. Frank brought 2 little girls with him, Tracy and Lori. They have been a blessing in our lives. I was not able to have children of my own. And so we not only live in Mason Neck, Virginia with our 2 little dogs, but we live very close by our daughter Tracy and our 2 granddaughters, Karen, Morgan, and our son-in-law, Lowell. Unfortunately, about 5 years ago now, we lost our younger daughter, Lori, to the demons of addiction. My life hasn't always been smooth. No one's is. After that long battle with breast cancer, I was lifted up by the kindness of so many strangers. I was sustained by the strength of my family and the power of my faith. And certainly we were sustained through Lori's long battle by many kind strangers and by our relationship with Jesus Christ. When I was a little girl, my mother said to me one Sunday morning, "What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God." And those words landed. Do you mind if I come down here?
No.
It feels very far away. Those words very much landed in my life. What she was saying to me was, even though I didn't feel very gifted as a child, I was kind of a goody two-shoes middle child. Everybody seemed more together than I was. But she was saying to me, you have gifts. And she was also challenging me to find and use my gifts. As you heard, I went on to a wonderful school, Stanford University, but I graduated with a degree in medieval history and philosophy. I was unemployable. I go off to law school. I hate it. I quit after a single semester. And now I need to earn a living. And so I did full-time what I had done part-time to put myself through college. I was a Kelly girl in college. I worked in hairdressers, answering the phones. I worked in local companies, typing and filing. And so I went to the want ads as a law school dropout and medieval history major, accepted the first job I was given, which was to type and file and answer the phones for a little 9-person real estate firm. I was asked a funny question today, in a way, by a reporter who said, well, have you ever had to live paycheck to paycheck? Well, yes. And I said, I can remember looking in my checking account and realizing that I had 5 cents left. And they asked me, well, what sort of trade-offs did you have to make? And I said, well, like, could I afford a car? The answer was no. Could I afford to go out to dinner that night? The answer was no. It's also true that having traveled and lived and worked all over the world, having met more world leaders on the stage today than anyone else running, honestly, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton, having done business on every continent in the globe, I know this for certain. It is only in the United States of America that a young woman can start out typing and filing and answering the phones for a 9-person real estate firm and go on to become the chief executive of the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That's only possible here. And it's possible here because our founders knew what my mother taught me. Our founders knew everyone has God-given gifts, that everyone has potential. And in fact, they founded a nation on this, what at the time was a radical idea, and it's a visionary idea still. And that idea is that everyone has potential and everyone has the right to fulfill their potential. That's what our founders meant when they said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That everyone has the right to fulfill their potential, and that that right comes from God and should not be taken away by man or government. And so they built a nation on that idea. And more things have been more possible for more people from more places than anywhere else on earth and at any other time in human history. I have learned all throughout my life in so many different settings that the truth is everyone does have potential. Most people have far more potential than they realize. And I also know that human potential is the only limitless resource we have in this world, and actually the only resource we need to solve every problem. I learned that when I was coming up in the business world. I didn't have a plan to become a CEO. I was just happy to be earning a living. And when I finally went off and got my MBA and showed up at AT&T as an entry-level salesperson in Washington, D.C. and met this man, Frank, I met him 34 years ago at AT&T. What I found out about myself is that I like challenge, and so I would run to a problem. And every time I ran to a problem, I would find people who knew how to solve the problem. It's just they'd never been asked. And so what I would do is say, well, look, here's a problem. Let's try and achieve this goal. And we would together unlock our potential and solve the problem. It sounds simple. It is simple to say. It's not always so easy to do, but that is in fact what's necessary to solve problems, is to focus on common goals and worthy purpose and unlock the human potential that exists right there to solve the problem and achieve the goal. I could tell you stories about women I've met all over the world and all across this country who are in desperate and destitute circumstances. I've met single women in this country with a couple of kids who were tangled up in webs of dependence, and yet they too have potential. They too have God-given gifts, and they want to live lives of dignity and purpose and meaning. Everyone does. It is a fundamental human desire, and yet they need someone to take a chance on them, someone to see potential in them, someone to give them a helping hand. Just like long ago when I was that young woman typing and filing, two men came up to me and said, you could do more than type. You have potential. That's what we all need. I could tell you about women who I've met in slums in New Delhi, India, desperate circumstances. And yet when through one of the charities I led, we would give them a $150 loan and tools and training and support, they would blossom and build better lives for themselves, because of course we were giving them more than $150 or tools. We were saying, we're gonna take a chance on you. You have potential. And that's why this has been the greatest nation ever, because this was a place where people knew they had a right to fulfill their potential, and they felt their lives filled with those possibilities. When I went to Hewlett-Packard, we saw a company that was falling behind. And yet in 6 short years, during the worst technology recession in 25 years, after 9/11, after the dot-com bust, we nevertheless, because we tapped the potential of the people in that company, we took a business from 44 billion to 90 billion. We took a growth rate from 2% to 9%. We tripled the rate of innovation to 11 patents a day. We went from lagging behind in every product category and every market segment to leading in every product category and every market segment. Not because we brought some new trick to the book or even new people. We tapped the potential of the people who were there. As I've traveled across Iowa, and on this trip, I've been here less than 24 hours. I've only been in 2 cities today, Cedar Rapids and Des Moines. But last time I was here, we did 15 cities and 1,300 miles in 4 days. And as I have gone across the state of Iowa, or even across this nation, I sense deep disquiet. Disquiet. It's not partisan. It's not political. But people are afraid we're losing something. And people think we're missing something. People are afraid that we're losing that sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation. We always knew that if something was worth doing, we were going to do it. If it was hard to do, even better, we would figure out how to do it. We knew that our own lives were filled with possibilities. We trusted that our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives would be filled with even greater possibilities, and yet Americans don't feel that way anymore. And when we lose the sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation, we lose the core of who we are. And if you look at the data, there's a reason Americans feel as though they are losing that sense of limitless possibility. The data is not good. The Obama administration touts a recovery, and certainly things are better today for many than they were in 2008, but more people are on food stamps than ever, almost 50 million people. We have the lowest labor participation rate since 1976, the year I graduated from college. We have 4 million plus people who have fallen into poverty. We have, for the first time in US history, we are now destroying more businesses than we are creating. And the businesses that we're destroying, the small businesses, the family-owned businesses, the new businesses, these are the engine of economic growth in our country. The truth is the 9-person real estate firm, the family-owned auto body shop that my husband started out in as a tow truck driver, the small, the family-owned, the new businesses, these are where 50% of Americans are employed. These kinds of businesses create 2/3 of the new jobs. And so when we are crushing them, and we are crushing possibilities. And so people's disquiet is real. It's supported by the facts. People are worried we're losing that sense of limitless possibility, but people are worried as well that we are missing something. And I think what people think we're missing is leadership. The kind of leadership that understands its highest calling is to unlock potential in others. And now I believe we need leadership to unlock the potential of this great nation and restore possibilities to every American's life, regardless of their circumstances. There's a big difference, between title and leadership, and there's a big difference between management and leadership. There are lots of people with big fancy titles. When I was a secretary, I thought if you had a big title, you were a leader. So the person with the big office was the leader. The person with the best parking space was the leader. And then I got older and wiser, and I learned that there were people with big titles, big offices, big parking places, big perks, and they weren't leading. Management isn't the same as leadership either. Managers are people who do the best they can within the existing system. Managers operate within the status quo. Leadership is not about position, power, and title. Leadership is about unlocking potential in others. And leaders do not accept the status quo. They change the status quo. And we are at a point now where we have lots of managers in Washington, D.C. We have lots of managers in the political class. But the truth is there is a lot that needs to be changed now about the status quo. We have come to a place in our nation's history where literally the weight, the power, the cost, the complexity, the corruption of the federal government is crushing the possibilities for this nation. And if you doubt that, look at what's happened to small and businesses, even as the big businesses get bigger and bigger. Crony capitalism is alive and well, there is no doubt. Crony capitalism is what? Crony capitalism is when big companies and big government work together. And we got plenty of that going on. Dodd-Frank, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the cause of the financial crisis, they've not been reformed, not at all. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac grew in the home mortgage business under Republicans and Democrats alike. But after the financial crisis, we didn't bother to reform Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We created a whole new agency. We created a whole new set of laws, Dodd-Frank, and the consequence of Dodd-Frank has been this, factually speaking. 10 Wall Street banks too big to fail have become 5, and 3,000 community banks have gone out of business. Because the 3,000 community banks, the places where a lot of people get their chance, get their helping hand, the community banks can't handle it. They can't handle the complexity. They can't handle the regulation. They can't handle all the requirements. They don't have the resources to hire endless lawyers and accountants and lobbyists to make sure that the rules work for them. When big gets bigger, only the big, the wealthy, the powerful, and the well-connected can handle it. And so we need to fundamentally reimagine government in all kinds of ways because this government no longer serves the citizens who pay for it. And the most obvious example of that is what's going on with the Veterans Administration. Our veterans are not being served. And this has been going on for a long time. You know what I would do? By the way, remember when the Arizona scandal broke, Congress passed a law. And it said you can fire the top 400 senior executives at the Veterans Administration if they're not doing their jobs. It's a good idea. I think actually we just should apply it all throughout government, but it's not fundamental reform. I would take 10, 25-year-old veterans, because they understand technology, and I would put them in a room and I would ask them, how do you want to be served? And they would give us a blueprint for how to reimagine the Veterans Administration that is better than any of the bureaucrats will ever come up with in Washington, D.C. Every one of our wounds is self-inflicted. We can solve every problem we have, but it will require citizenship, citizens to re-engage in the process of their government, citizens to remember that ours was intended to be a citizen government by, for, and of the people. We were never intended to have a professional political class, and we didn't for most of our nation's history. And leadership, the kind of leadership that has the courage to reimagine how the federal government should serve the citizens that pay for it. And of course, and I'll wrap up with this, there is no place where leadership is more needed than in the world today. Because when America is not leading, the world is a dangerous and a tragic place. I mentioned that I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world, that I have met and known many, many world leaders on the stage today, and that is true. And what I can tell you from all those experiences is that when we do not stand with our allies, and when we do not confront our adversaries, our allies lose courage, and our adversaries press forward. And that is precisely what is happening in the world today. And I would be happy to take any questions you have about what do we do? What do we do about Iran? What do we do about ISIS? What do we do about Russia? What do we do about China? I will close with this thought, because honestly, it is the thought that I keep in my mind as I think about the possibilities that should exist in every American's life. I think a lot about what it takes to win this job, and so do all of you. You're activists. But I also think about what it takes to do this job. And I think to do this job at a pivotal point in our nation's history requires someone who actually understands how the economy works. It requires someone who actually understands how the world works and who's in the world, and what the leaders in the world today are prepared to do or not do. I think it takes someone who understands bureaucracy, because our government has become one giant, bloated, corrupt, unaccountable bureaucracy. I think it takes someone who understands technology, how to use it to reimagine a bureaucracy and to re-engage citizenry. And I think it takes someone who understands executive decision-making, which is a tough call in a tough time with high stakes for which you're prepared to be held accountable. I told you I hold a picture in my mind, and I do. I hold a picture in my mind of two women who have come to be powerful symbols of our nation, Lady Liberty and Lady Justice. And I think if we think about these two ladies, we remember who it is we are intended to be. Lady Liberty, she stands tall and strong. She is clear-eyed, she is resolute. She faces outward into the world, which is the way America always must face. And she holds her torch high, because she understands that she is a beacon of hope in a troubled world. And Lady Justice, she holds a sword in one hand, because she is a fighter. She is a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale in the other hand. And with that scale, she is saying to us, all of us are equal in the eyes of God. All of us have God-given gifts. No one of us is any better than any other one of us. And so each of us must be the same in the eyes of government and in the eyes of the law, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And I think with that blindfold, she reminds us that in this nation, it should never matter what you look like, where you come from, what your circumstances are. Here in this country, every American's life should be filled with possibilities, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. So questions, who has the first one? Yes, ma'am.
Healthcare professional and 3 teenagers, so you can all pray for me. Interested on a brief segment on your thoughts on Obamacare and what you might do if you're elected.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, you know, I'm a cancer survivor, and so when President Obama laid out his goals for Obamacare, I think many Americans agreed with them. We have to make sure that no one with a pre-existing condition is prevented from getting health care that they can afford. We have to make sure that nobody goes bankrupt over a health problem. We need to make sure that people actually have access to quality, affordable health care. I think everybody stood up and applauded those goals. That's right. The only trouble is we're not meeting those goals with Obamacare. In fact, what we've done with Obamacare, these are just realities. Obamacare, the law itself, is longer than a Harry Potter novel. That's really long. And it's not very interesting, so nobody's read it. However, the people who helped write it are health insurance companies, drug care companies, big companies who want to make sure that the rules work for them. And then that big, complicated piece of legislation was accompanied by another 30,000+ pages of regulation. So what's the effect of that? The big companies who know how to play the game know what's in that bill that nobody else does. Nobody can possibly understand it. And so what's happening? By the way, I'm sure you saw the report in the paper the other day, emergency care visits are up, not down. They're up, not down, because all the people that we threw onto these federal government programs to get health insurance, like Medicare or Medicaid, guess what? They don't reimburse the doctors sufficiently, so the doctors won't treat these patients. So we haven't fixed some basic problems. We also see hospitals consolidating, health insurance companies consolidating, drug companies consolidating. In other words, the typical pattern of crony capitalism is occurring. The big get bigger so they can handle this big, complicated government. But we're not really solving the problem. So here's what I would do. I would give the responsibility to the states to manage high-risk pools so that people who truly needed help, who truly need help, are helped. I would make sure that people with pre-existing conditions are covered in those pools. But then I would repeal Obamacare and go back to the one thing we have never tried. We have never tried a free market in health insurance. What we've had for 100 years, is a big regulated oligopoly in the health insurance market. We used to do it, 50 states. Each state had its own little regulated system. Now we just nationalize that to one big, huge system. But consumers aren't served. So let's try the free market where you're in charge of your health insurance and people have to compete for your business.
Right.
Of course there's a role for regulation to make sure that we have safety. Of course there's a role for assistance for those who truly need it. But a big, huge, complicated, 100,000-page set of rules and regs is a recipe for the ascent of the wealthy, the powerful, the big, and the well-connected, and the crushing of the small, the powerless, and the needy.
You mentioned that you like to solve problems or gather experts to help solve problems. You know, there's the debt, entitlements, Social Security.
Yeah.
So when elected, what would your budget look like for the first year?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, one of the interesting things about the kind of the pickle we've gotten ourselves in as a nation is that our out-of-control debt and deficits are one side of the coin, and our lack of economic growth and opportunity is the other side of the coin. In other words, we have these huge growing debts and deficits because government is getting so big, and we're destroying opportunities and possibilities because government is getting so big. There are only two ways to reduce the debt and the deficit. You know what they are. What do you have to do? Grow the economy, reduce spending. That's it. It's the only way out of it. Grow the economy, reduce spending. Grow the economy, reduce spending. That's what we have to do. The good news is, if we reduce spending in the right places and in the right ways, we help grow the economy. So the first thing I would do, some of you have heard me talk about this before, the first thing I would do is make sure that we understand where every single dollar is being spent. I call that zero-based budgeting. Let's see every single dollar. The truth is, we don't have a clue where our money's being spent today. We never look at a whole budget, ever. And if you don't look at all the spending, you can't prioritize the spending. So what we're doing in the government today, we don't ever argue about all the spending. We just argue about what's the change in the rate between last year and this year. We just passed a budget, first time since 2009, great progress, way to go. But we don't know what the whole is in that whole budget, not at all. So let's understand where we're spending our money so that we can prioritize. Second thing I would do, I would move to pay for performance systems, get rid of the seniority system so that you can't just sit around doing nothing or worse, watch porn and earn the same pay, pension, and benefits as somebody trying to do a good job. That's not hyperbole. We get Inspector General reports about that reality about every 3 months. But most importantly of all, perhaps, I would go after what we know is already there. Every year, we receive yet another report in excruciating and embarrassing detail about the hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption in our federal government budget, and no one does anything. No one's done anything for a really long time. That's called managing within the status quo. To do every single one of the things I just talked about, actually get after the fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption, actually see what's in the federal budget and go to zero-based budgeting, actually go to pay for performance for senior executives, for every federal government employee. To get all that done, it requires leadership that isn't afraid to challenge the status quo, but it requires citizenship as well. Citizens to say, enough, we don't have to settle for this anymore. And I would use technology to engage citizens in that process and to ask them very directly, you know, instead of voting for American Idol tonight on your smartphone, I'd like you to vote on this question. Do you think we should get rid of the hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption Senator Tom Coburn outlines every year? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. I think the political process might get a message. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering about eminent domain and if you support foreign corporations using eminent domain to take Americans' land.
Yes, well, the answer would be no. Bad idea. But here's it. Yes, go ahead.
So then, if you don't support that, do you not support the Keystone Pipeline?
I do support the Keystone Pipeline, but the Keystone Pipeline should be voted on, has been voted on, by the way, by the representatives of the people, and it is the President of the United States who has decided he's not moving ahead with it. He's not moving ahead with it. If the people of the United States didn't want the Keystone Pipeline, they have an opportunity to say no, but they said yes. The President said no. And of course, the hypocrisy of the President's veto of the Keystone Pipeline is that what we're doing today, you know, shipping all this stuff around by rail is worse for the environment than what we would be doing with the Keystone Pipeline. But I think the point is, where I thought you were going with that question was that eminent domain is yet another example of the abuse of the federal government. I mean, they've taken a concept that made sense, but the federal government has now extended it. And so we see lots of examples where that concept is being abused because the rights of a private citizen are just inconvenient, and that's not right either. There was a hint. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming to Dallas County, and thank you for getting in the race.
You're welcome.
A lot of good candidates this year. As you were speaking, came to my mind that the next president might need a background in medieval history.
Well, you know,
Who would have thought?
my degree in medieval history did come in handy the day I was sitting at the National Prayer Breakfast, and our president compared the Crusades to ISIS. He got his history wrong. The Crusades, of course, were a reaction to an aggressive force on the other side that also carried the flag of religion. Both sides did, and no doubt, atrocities were committed on both sides. What the president was right about is that ISIS actually does want to drive the entire world back into the Middle Ages. It's just the rest of us moved on about 800 years ago. ISIS is a terrible enemy, an evil enemy. And it is ironic to me that it takes a pious Muslim who is the president of Egypt today to call ISIS for what it is. When 21 Coptic Christians were beheaded on the beaches of Egypt, it was the president of Egypt who went into Cairo to visit with the most powerful imams in Cairo and said, there is a cancer in the heart of Islam and only you can help root it out. And that is the truth. ISIS, we now know, is aggressively, actively recruiting in this country. And they are succeeding, we now learn, based upon the attack in Texas. And so ISIS has to be defeated here and abroad. But this is where our president has presented the American people with a false choice every time. His false choice is this. He does it with Afghanistan, with Russia, with ISIS, with Syria. The false choice is, if you don't like what I'm doing, the only option is to march off to war. It's a completely false choice. So even in Syria, there are many things we could have done several years ago, arming moderate rebels. He didn't. But with ISIS, there are very specific things we've been asked to do by our allies. The Egyptians, who want very much to win this fight, because they do understand it is their fight, even more than it is ours. They want us to share intelligence with them. They want us to stand with them. We will not. And when the president of Egypt bombed in response to the beheading of 21 Coptic Christians, our president said, and I'm quoting, "We neither condemn nor condone the Egyptians' actions." So what signal does that send? The signal it sends is, we're not sure whether we stand with you or not. When the Jordanian pilot was burned alive, King Abdullah of Jordan was here. I have known King Abdullah for many years. King Abdullah was here asking our government to provide him with bombs and materiel. He promptly flew home and he began bombing right after he executed 2 convicted terrorists without apology. To this day, he does not have his bombs and his materiel. The Kurds have been asking us to arm them. We have not, really. We use an excuse of the government in Baghdad, which clearly is not necessarily any longer on our side. The Kurds are probably the best fighting force in the Middle East. We're not arming them, we should. And we have a whole series of other allies in the Middle East. United Arab Emirates, the Qataris, the Saudis, the Turks even, who have asked us for very specific things, and we're not providing. So, we need to know who this enemy is. We need to be prepared to stand with our allies and to provide them the support they have asked us for. And we need to be prepared to have the courage and the stamina to see this thing through. Yes, sir.
What's your position on off-reservation casino expansion?
So that is obviously a big issue here. It's a big issue here. And, you know, as you know, I'm sure based on your question, you know that Indian tribes are by treaty sovereign nations. So they have a different status than a state does. And of course, it's important that our nation honor our treaties with those nations. It's also true that Obama has changed the rules for gambling. And he's decided to say, well, you know, the 50-mile radius, we're going to change that. And so now you face a situation here where, as I understand it, you have Indian reservations, Indian tribes saying they want to bring gambling into your state far beyond the original limits of their ability to do so. So I really think this is an important issue for the people of Iowa to decide. I don't know whether you have a vote coming up on this in any way, but I think it's something you should be able to vote on. Absent a new president in the White House who will roll back those changes in the rules, there is nothing a president can do or should do to change the sovereign nation status of those Indian tribes. Yes?
I was just wondering what your stance on immigration is. Specifically, what would you do, what would the plan be for the undocumented
So I think we have to, I mentioned the word priorities in response to the gentleman before, and I think priorities are really important. So let's start with the most important priority. We actually have to secure the border. We have to secure the northern border. And the truth is we haven't. We haven't. We haven't under Republicans and we haven't under Democrats. And we need to. Because if we don't secure the border, the problem gets worse. If we don't secure the border, our enemies continue to take advantage of it. They are. And equally importantly, if we don't secure the border, which is sort of a basic role of the federal government, then people lose faith. They think, wow, the federal government can't even do this. What can they do? Second thing we have to do, we have to fix the legal immigration system, which has been broken for 30 years probably. We have 16 different visa programs that don't make a lot of sense. We have half the people who are here illegally came on a legal visa and just overstayed and nobody bothered to care. We have situations where the wrong people are being let in and the wrong people are being sent home. We don't have a system that permits employers to reliably verify the legal status of their workers. And without that, we can't hold employers accountable, and we should be able to hold them accountable if they knowingly hire illegal. So we gotta fix that. And then we gotta decide what to do with the people who are here illegally and came here illegally. My own view is that they do not earn the right for citizenship, ever. And I say that not to be punitive. I say that because too many people have worked hard to earn the privilege of citizenship. They've taken the oath. They've studied our Constitution. They have stood and pledged their allegiance. And I don't think it's fair to say to all those people, never mind that you played by the rules. These folks who didn't get the same privilege. I am willing to accept that folks that are here illegally, who haven't committed a crime, who pay all their back taxes, all those things, may earn a legal status so they can live here and work here. Perhaps their children can earn the privilege of citizenship. But I think, unfortunately, they forfeited that privilege by the fact that they broke the rules.
I'm an independent. I heard you speak last week. That's why I came back tonight. I'm a veteran. 42 years ago when I got out of the Army, we were coming down from a different war. Things are way different now. But this time we had the sequestration on top of the country cutting back on military from the war. And I'm watching a friend who was in the Army with 42 years ago. His son signed up for the Navy. And he's on his finishing 1 year of waiting after being signed up for officership. Sequestration ripped across at the wrong time. It took off many other things. We do need to have cutbacks. I've heard you speak on that. That's why I came back. I think you have some good ideas about some areas that are crony capitalism on defense spending are way too obvious. Point, when I was in the Army, when you lose a binocular in your company, and you're gonna get charged 56 bucks for it, and you go to the PX, and it's 45, something's wrong. Some ideas on what you can do to help us from sequestration.
Well, first, sir, thank you so much for your service to our nation and all of the rest of you here. How many of you are veterans? Our nation's veterans. The way we serve our veterans, the way we support our active duty troops is a stain on this nation's honor, period. It is the single most obvious, glaring example of a government that no longer serves its citizens. So, with regard to the sequestration in particular, we talked about priorities. I have advised 2 secretaries of defense and chair the advisory board of the Central Intelligence Agency. And so in the course of that work, I got a look at a lot of defense budgets. And what's very clear, if you look at defense budgets over time, is that what's called the tooth to tail ratio is really out of whack. Tooth, tip of the spear, fighting men and women, the stuff that you need. I know moms, I said this earlier today at an ed board at the Des Moines Register because it's been on my mind. I know a mother who is shipping blankets and sheets to her son in Afghanistan because he doesn't have them. These aren't cookies from home. These are basics. So the tooth is all out of whack, the tip of the spear. We're not spending enough money on the tooth. And the tail is all out of whack too. We're spending inordinate amounts of money on bureaucracy and headquarters and civilian contracting. So over time, as you probably know from the way you respond to that, tooth to tail ratios are measured over time. And they're getting worse, not better. And they got particularly worse during two very difficult wars, which is totally backwards. And so we need to invest more in the tooth, without a doubt, without a doubt. And we need to reform the tail. And unfortunately, what happened with sequestration is the bureaucracy reacted the way bureaucracies always do. They didn't prioritize. They just did across the board. Whoops, you know, it's so easy. We don't have to make any tough decisions. We don't have to prioritize. We don't have to say, you know, I'm really sorry, sir, you're a civilian contractor. You're actually not as important right now to give money to than the kid out in Afghanistan. They didn't say any of that. They just said, shh, across the board, everybody gets the same. And so the tooth to tail ratios have gotten even worse because a tooth investment cut 10% has a way different impact than bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. getting cut 10%. It's yet another example of we have to see it all and we have to prioritize. Invest more where we need it, tooth. Cut and reform, tail, where we don't. Yes?
I'd like to get back to a little bit of how we can win this thing.
How we can win this thing, because by the way, we really do have to win this thing.
You can run a con job for a while, but eventually you're going to be judged on performance.
We're held accountable in the real world.
You know, from an employee in a small shop to you know, product manager, to the head of a multinational. But in government, it seems like it's the only place where it doesn't matter what your effectiveness was, it matters how good your intentions were. And so the government...
What you said they were.
Government, yeah, exactly, exactly. what your apparent intentions were. So government has been lying to us and spending money that they don't have. And this is even more effective on the federal level than the state government, because the state government can't print money, but on the federal government they just keep making it up. And so the Democrats are going to go out again next time, and they're going to try to buy the voters' votes. Now, I think that people are beginning to get the picture that this isn't working, but I'm concerned that not enough of them are getting that picture. So how are we going to, we all in this room understand what freedom in our personal lives, and freedom to run a business, and free markets and free markets in healthcare, all the great things that would do for us. But how do we get that vision out there to people who don't have it?
So first, of course, to win this thing, we got to put up a nominee who can win it. That means we got to have a nominee who can take a punch and throw a punch. Secondly, we're going to need a nominee who can point out that Hillary Clinton has not been held accountable. That while she has enjoyed many wonderful titles, she hasn't accomplished very much. That it's a problem when you are not transparent because it suggests you are not trustworthy. It's a problem when our embassy in Benghazi is attacked purposely by terrorists on the anniversary of 9/11, and our Secretary of State stands over the bodies of 4 fallen Americans and tells the people of this nation that it was a video and a demonstration gone bad. It matters when a Secretary of State says, never mind, I'm not going to play by the rules. I'm going to have my own personal server buried in my basement. I'm going to use my own device, and I'll decide what emails you get to see and which emails you don't get to see. And it matters that she promised to disclose every foreign government donation to the Clinton Global Initiative while she was Secretary of State, and she has disclosed none, and that initiative now has had to refile its tax returns for the 5th time. All that matters. And it matters as well that she does not have a track record of accomplishment. So we better have a nominee who can look Hillary Clinton in the eye and say, you know what, Hillary, this isn't about women's issues. This isn't about the war on women. This isn't about your gender. This actually is going to be about your track record, your trustworthiness, your policies, and what they mean for this nation. Because on that ground, we can win this election. But to your specific point, and then I know you've had your hand up, so I'm sorry. To that specific point, we cannot leave anyone behind in this nation. We cannot write off anybody, especially not 47% of our people. And so I think what we have to do is tell stories about why what we're talking about will work better. I talk to women, single moms with a couple kids. I think about the woman that I met when I was distributing diapers as the head of a charity. This woman had great gifts, she had great potential, and her life was so tangled up in a web of dependence she could not escape. When she wanted to move forward and get a 40-hour-a-week job, it meant that she would have to give up food stamps that her kids depended upon. Think about the risk that that feels like to that woman. She says, oh my gosh, what if I get fired? What if I lose my job? Now I have to reapply for this all over again. We make it so hard for people to get on with their lives. And so we have to explain to people why all this big government is not helping them, because they are small and powerless. All of this big government is helping the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected. And we have to speak to people, everybody, in a tone of empathy and respect, and not talk way up here, but talk the way normal people talk. I also think that our tone matters a lot. I think, you know, I've talked to a lot of women last year who disengaged from the political process, and you ask them why, and they will say, I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired of the sound bites. I'm so tired of the slogans. I'm so tired of the arguing. I'm so tired of the vitriol. I'm so tired of all the back and forth, and nothing really ever seems to change. People disengage not because they don't care, but because they think they don't count. And we have to talk to people in a way, include people, so that they know they count. Yes, sir.
Yes, my question is, how much longer do you think Hillary Clinton can hide from the media and the press? She hasn't said anything, I think, in
28 days.
28 days, and you know, the interesting thing is the New York Times has a feature on how many days it's been.
Yeah.
And they're now starting to print the questions they'd like to ask her if she would only answer them. You know, it's interesting. I think that some people would say to you, when you talk about what it takes to win, there are lots of people who would say the best way to win is to carefully control the message. So you see a lot of politicians, when they get out there, they have a carefully controlled launch event, you know, they want to be in control of the message. I actually have a very different point of view. I think the more people we talk to, the more people who understand what's going on, the better. So it's not about controlling the message, it's about access. So the day I launched my campaign, we had a national press call. It was unprecedented. We took as many questions as the media had, and so somebody actually laid out how many questions we answered in one day. I don't know how long Hillary Clinton is going to get away with this, but we know for a fact that she will get away with more. And that is why it is so important that we have a nominee who will not let her get away with a thing. And we will have a nominee who stands on the general debate stage with her and talks to the American people about what is really going on in their lives, in the federal government, and with Hillary Clinton. Yes?
With all your technology background, is there a way that you and your staff can figure out a way to get your message out to every Obama phone?
You know, it's interesting. It's a great question. So one of the things we did also on the first day of my announcement, so Monday of this week, and we're going to try all kinds of things, but we used this very cool technology called Periscope, and we invited people to join, and we had people all over the country. We didn't control access. We didn't say you can only be a Republican. We said, if you want to come on, you come on, and you ask whatever you ask. We had people from all over the country. We had somebody in Paris who asked a question, we had somebody in the Philippines who asked a question, and we took them all. I got asked everything from, do you consider a hot dog a sandwich? I actually flubbed that question because I got kind of waylaid and went down this thing about how I really don't like hot dogs, even though they're great American food. But I never answered whether I think it's a sandwich or not. What do you think? I don't think so. But anyway, everything from, is a hot dog a sandwich, to what would you do about Iran? And that's the way this campaign is going to be. We're going to talk to as many people as possible. And if they're not Republicans, great. I mean, of course, we love to talk to Republicans because you guys are going to decide who the nominee is going to be. But in the meantime, we'll talk to as many people as possible and use technology to do that. And as I tried to suggest in my comments before, we will also use technology. If I am in the White House, we will use technology to engage people in the process of government, to ask them questions so that they can help put pressure on the political system. I am totally confident. I am totally confident that if I went into the Oval Office and said, okay, I have a question for everyone, get out your smartphones. How do you feel? Do you think it's right that we don't serve our veterans? Do you think it's right that people watch pornography all day long and earn the same pay, pension, and benefits? Do you think it's right that we know where hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, waste, and abuse are right under our noses and nobody does anything about it? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. I think we get an answer. I think we get an answer. Yes, sir.
So I'm graduating from college in 7 months and 11 days, not that I'm counting.
Not that you're counting.
And I'm not so much worried about finding a job as I am paying back my student loans. So what can we do to combat the rising cost of education and like rising interest rates on student loans?
Yeah. So here's the dirty little secret about student loans, which maybe you didn't know. A lot of people don't know this. The Obama administration nationalized the student loan industry. It used to be a competitive industry. Maybe not as competitive as it should have been, but it used to be you had lots of choices. Now you don't. Federal government decides, and they decide what interest rate you're going to be charged. And isn't it interesting that the federal government is charging you somewhere between 6.5% and 7.5%, and the interest they pay on their debt is more like 0.5%. Doesn't strike me as right somehow. I mean, where is that money going? Example of not knowing where our money is being spent. So once again, we must return to a free market in the student loan business. I mean, so you have more choices. Because what happens when you give consumers choices? What always happens? Price goes down. Price goes down. We also need to make sure that we're not throwing a lot of useless regulation at colleges that up the cost. So the college accreditation process is sometimes a problem that adds to cost. You've seen this administration go after, in a very concerted way, for-profit colleges. The Democrats, because of the special interest group called the teachers' unions, the Democrats are trying to limit choices in education. They're trying to limit choices in K through 12 education when they try and shut down charter schools or shut down tax credits for homeschoolers or for people who send their kids to parochial schools. That's called limiting choices. And they're trying to do the same thing at the university level now, limiting choices. So they put real pressure on for-profit universities. We need more choices, not less choices. More choices in terms of where people can be educated, how people can be educated. And it is true that over time, a student should be able to choose how they want to be educated. Not everybody needs a 4-year degree in medieval history and philosophy. Really, some people, perhaps, given their ambitions, their gifts, their goals, would do far better with more technical training and less book learning. But people can't get that kind of education unless there are lots of choices for them.
Ms. Fiorina, if we could maybe just have one more.
All right, one more. The hook is getting nervous. Yes, ma'am.
With all my political dreams, my best one is yourself debating Hillary. That remains a possibility.
Yes, it does.
And would you like to further the comments on Hillary wiggling out of all of this with the Clinton machine or do you think that she really will be held accountable?
So first, thank you very much. I too would like to debate Hillary Clinton on a general election day. So I would like to ask you to help me. If you want to help me get there, go to Carly for President. Go to carlyforpresident.com and help me get there.
I would put my money on you.
All right. I did not pay her to say that. But you can put your money on me at carlyforpresident.com. I think we need to be realistic. Hillary Clinton will be the nominee of her party, okay? That's what's gonna happen. Now, if there's some huge scandal that erupts, maybe that we don't know about, maybe the Democrats will get so nervous they'll draft Elizabeth Warren, but unless something really way beyond what we've seen so far happens, Hillary Clinton will be their nominee. I think we can also assume that while the press has been pretty good at trying to track all this stuff down, I mean, there's been more press about the Clinton Global Initiative than I think the Clintons expected. There's been more press about the email server in the basement in Chappaqua than the Clintons expected. I think you probably saw Bill Clinton getting questioned the other day on whether or not he should be earning $500,000 a speech. I don't begrudge the president what he earns on a speech. I just thought it was interesting that he said that he deserved that much because he had to think for a couple hours before a speech. In any event, I think we can assume that the media is not going to be how Hillary Clinton is held accountable. I think how Hillary Clinton is going to be held accountable is by citizens and voters in this country. And I think the only way we can ensure that voters and citizens truly understand so that she is held accountable is to have a nominee remind them day after day after day after day. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been wonderfully welcoming. I always so appreciate the opportunity to be back here in Iowa. You will see me a lot in this wonderful state. I will very much be grateful for your continued support, your continued enthusiasm, your continued encouragement. In no small measure, I declared my candidacy for the presidency because I have gotten so much encouragement and support from the people of Iowa. So I hope you'll help me. I hope you'll continue to support me. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening.